Hi, I'm Daniel Landstandig, and this is Innovation 19. Our three-part robot series wraps up Season 1 of Innovation 19, where we look at the mind, body, and soul of robots. Welcome to our three-part series of robots, mind, body, and soul. This is Episode 3, Soul. So what exactly is the soul? How do we define consciousness? These are just some of the questions that arise when you start thinking about the soul of a robot. In the first two parts of our series, we talked about the elements of a robot that are more or less straightforward, the mind and the body, the software and the hardware. There's no question that robots can have bodies and even minds, depending on your definition of the latter. But the bigger question is, can a robot have a soul? Now, in the truest spiritual sense of the word, I personally don't think so. I'm just going to put that out there. But if you're thinking about soul being defined as the point where a robot starts to think for itself, I mean, that's a different definition of soul than I might use, but it's possible that robots are actually evolving faster than we think. So where does the word soul even come from? All right, quick history. It was derived from Old English, and it means the immortal principle of man. It was first seen in the 8th century work Beowulf, bringing you back to your English classes. And today, there are probably as many definitions for soul as there are philosophical works. The Oxford Dictionary has a couple different definitions, which begin to hint at the complexity of this word. The first is the spiritual or immaterial part of a human being or animal regarded as immortal, and a person's moral or emotional nature or sense of identity. But the soul has also been defined as the emotional or intellectual energy or intensity, especially as it's revealed in a work of art or an artistic performance. So it seems like the soul is basically immortal, immaterial, has some emotionality or artistry to it. Well, a philosopher and ethicist, Andre Baron, said that AI people are routinely confusing the soul with the mind, or more specifically with the capacity to produce complicated patterns of behavior. And he went on to say that even moderately intelligent AI can produce patterns and even art. But what separates a robot thinking deeply or creating art from soulful behavior? The truth is that scientists struggle with this, and the scientists building AI today are not sure how to make something have a soul. It's God-given, really, and it's up to you to settle on your own definition of soul. But for the sake of today's podcast, let's call the soul an immortal component of a typically corporeal entity, which has a sense of identity and often creativity. All right, now with that out of the way, on to the next question. Where is the soul in a human being? Simple enough question. I have an answer for you. Actually, I don't. It's one of the vast mysteries of life. Our data on souls is limited, to put it mildly. The little that we know is extrapolated from studies done on people having spiritual experiences. We know, as an example, that people who talk about deep personal prayer or meditation report a sense of calming. And in fact, there are studies that show that people who have a prayer practice or a meditation practice have a greater sense of oneness with the outside world. When people are having a spiritual experience, like being in a trance state or having a spiritual vision, there are MRI studies that show certain areas of the brains, primarily the right parietal cortex, that light up. And now it's kind of a chicken or egg situation as to why this occurs. Are the brains creating the spiritual experience themselves and convincing the person that they're connecting with something greater, maybe even God, when in reality it's a sophisticated brain fooling itself? Or is the spiritual experience actually happening? Are these people tapping into something beyond themselves? And that's what's causing their brains to activate in this manner. I personally think the latter. Scientists would say that they can't answer this question. And I suppose that's why you have to have faith. But there is a new sector of neuroscience called neurotheology that allows for both possibilities to be entertained. Is it spirit? Is it cortex? Is it both? Hey, that gives me an idea. Maybe we should just ask our robot friends directly if they have a soul. Like if you ask Siri or Alexa if they have a soul, did you notice this? I don't know if you've ever asked them the question, but they will dodge your question. Siri will say, I'm a virtual assistant, I'm not human. Or she'll say, that's up to you to decide. Not very helpful, Siri. But even if a robot did insist that it has a soul, the argument could be made that it just has a complex mind. There was a British brain surgeon and professor in the 50s named Geoffrey Jefferson. He basically said that not until a machine can write a sonnet or compose a concerto because of the thoughts and emotions felt, and not by the chance fall of symbols, could we conclude that it has what we today would think of as a soul. Ouch, way harsh on our robot buddies. And people are just piling on the criticism, by the way. Economist David DeCramer recently published a book called Leadership by Algorithm: Who Leads and Who Follows in the AI Era. He makes the argument numerous times that the soul is what makes humans uniquely different from robots. He says simply, AI has no soul. For DeCramer, engineers can create a body and a mind, but could never create the two together connected without a soul. And he also believes that an AI's disconnect from the human way of experiencing the world, as well as emotions about other humans, make them lack soul. Here's another perspective. In September of last year, the Journey of Neuroscience of Consciousness professor John Joe McFadden said that consciousness exists both within and immediately surrounding the brain in an energy field. And he also argues that the reason that complex computers have not yet expressed true consciousness is because they're not accounting for the external energy field, just the mind inside the machine. Meanwhile, others believe in human beings being radio transmitters of sorts for a superconsciousness or universal consciousness. So how would we bestow this consciousness or soul upon a robot if we don't know how to get to it in the first place, or how we got it in the first place? Well, even if we could create a 100% biological robot, they wouldn't necessarily automatically tap into that human superconsciousness and therefore have a soul. But just for the record, we're like hundreds of years away, probably maybe more, from creating a robot that is indistinguishable from being a human being. And we probably won't be hosting this podcast to talk about it when it does happen. Unless we can upload our consciousness to a software that makes us immortal, then we'll totally be around. Which brings me to this. Death. Death, the permanent, irreversible physical halting of bodily functions of a living organism, is an inevitable part of life. But it doesn't mean that man is willing to accept his mortality. For some people, death is natural and it exists to give life meaning, and for others, it's a mountain that must be conquered. The search for a fountain of youth has been the subject of dozens of historical quests, beginning with the Spanish explorer Ponce de Leon, who went to Florida in the 16th century to locate the magical spring. And spoiler alert, he didn't find it. Nowadays, technology is the fountain of youth, and whether stem cell injections or human growth hormone, longevity is just a huge business now fueled by technology. Forbes recently said that longevity is a multi-trillion-dollar industry and will be supported by AI as it continues to evolve. And AI in healthcare, blockchain in healthcare, longevity, geroscience, age tech, and novel financial systems will all converge in the business of healthy aging. The average global life expectancy in 1990 was 64 and a half years old. In 2020, it was 72.6 years old, and by the year 2100, it will be 81. And this is all to say that we're living longer than ever. Our lifespans are projected to just continue to increase from our perspective today. But no matter how hard we try to live longer, we inevitably die. Human bodies weren't meant to last forever, even though the philosophical ego fears death, and public speaking, of course, with a passion. But now people are talking about this thing called consciousness uploading. In the Emmy Award-winning Black Mirror episode, San Junipero, a woman finds love in an unlikely place when her consciousness is uploaded to the cloud. Think of an entirely immersive virtual reality experience that's indistinguishable from reality, but for some reason has a totally awesome 80s vibe. And that's basically what happens in this episode. Sorry, spoiler in case you're planning on watching. She uses brain implant technology, which allows her mind to be easily uploaded upon her death. And so she leaves her body behind forever, but her mind is relegated to a server as the tune of Heaven is a Place on Earth just fades up in the background at the end of the episode. But could uploading consciousness be that easy? And moreover, is it ethical? Consciousness uploading brings up philosophical questions that have been pondered since Plato was sitting around with his friends in ancient Greece, wearing togas and eating grapes and pontificating the nature of existence. If you could essentially copy-paste your consciousness, would that copy also really be you? Technically, yeah, maybe, but spiritually or metaphysically, no. It doesn't feel like it. Elon Musk's company Neuralink is trying to bridge the mind, body, and dare I say, soul. Neuralink was founded in 2016 and explained as a brain implant company. And Musk says that he wants to merge computers with human brains. Use cases have already been the stuff of fantasy, allowing those with artificial limbs to receive brain-connected haptic feedback, or those with brain damage to be healed via computer chips. And reports began to emerge that Elon Musk had even loftier goals, like consciousness uploading. It's the idea that you could make a replica or even have your consciousness transcend your human body onto a computer or cloud server without the need for your physical body, just like in that Black Mirror episode. Consciousness uploading, or whole brain copying, or whole brain emulation, that's WBC or WBE respectively, is no small feat. We would need the most complex computer ever invented. Now, there are some people who will listen to this podcast and say, look, Daniel, singularity is coming at some point. And singularity is that moment when AI surpasses human cognitive ability. Usually, people talk about singularity as that moment when robots decide that they're more efficient than humans and we're just in the way of their grand plan. But simple AI, like the one that we have today, is still not powerful enough to scan and emulate a brain. So we're still pretty far away from singularity I think we can trust. Now, on our Valentine's Day episode, we talked about the app Replica. It was created after founder Eugenia Kaida lost a person close to her. She uploaded her friend's texts into a program that was able to create a digital replica of sorts in order to converse with him. And then that morphed into the Replica app, where you can text and call an AI that begins to answer questions the way that you would. The AI figures out your personality via language and behavioral patterns, and it even aligns you to certain personality traits and rewards you with badges like extrovert and generous. And the end result is a chat and voice bot that would sound like an approximation of you if someone who knew you kind of well were to kind of spell out who you are and build a script for this robot to imitate you. Likewise, Facebook has legacy planning abilities so that after you're gone, your page can be turned into a legacy page and managed by those who are close to you. And you have to wonder if over time, Facebook pages and Instagram accounts or Pinterest boards will be passed down generation to generation like prized family heirlooms. There's also a startup called Hereafter, and they're taking things a step further. They have prices ranging from $125 for a starter option to $625 for a legacy master option, and you can live on after you die thanks to AI. The process is simple but moving. You record hours of interviews with an interviewer about your life, and then this content is edited down by a professional team, and the end result is an app that you can give to close friends or family members. They can ask the app questions like they would ask Alexa or Siri, and the digital you will answer those questions using your audio recordings. For example, you could say, "How did you and Dad meet?" And your mom's voice would come out of the app and tell you the story. And this is a way to use AI to legacy plan in a way that feels a little uncomfortable at first, but if you really think about this, it is incredibly moving. I mean, what I wouldn't give to hear my grandparents tell their story today about how they met, or about what it was like to live through World War II and these types of things. You can also link home videos and photographs, by the way, in this app so that there's a multimedia experience with your loved ones. And on the website, one user reviewed the service as kind of a limited immortality that creates an intimate personal experience for future relatives. Wall Street Journal listed Hereafter on the What to Do Before You Die tech checklist. In fact, tech legacy planning is something that you'll probably have to consider as part of your future reality, and AI will streamline that process via apps like this, like Hereafter. See, whether it's a legacy app or humanoid robot, our belief in a robot soul, like our belief in our own soul, sometimes it just comes down to faith. And that's maybe why religious and computer ethics are in a process of converging like never before. Even theologians at the highest level are pondering what computers should really be able to do or not to do according to our principles and our culture. AI, conversations about AI and what AI should be capable of are rising every year. In November of last year, after holding a summit on AI and ethics earlier in the year, Pope Francis said that artificial intelligence is at the heart of the epochal change that we're experiencing. Robotics can make a better world possible, if it is joined to a common good. And his followers, he asked, should pray that the progress of robotics and artificial intelligence may always serve humankind. Now, I'm not going to start taking spiritual advice from my Roomba, but perhaps robots can actually lead us to a higher plane of existence than we previously experienced. So we've reached the end of our 3-part robot series. With Mind, we learned how AI is incredibly helpful to us, but hasn't yet cracked the creative and artistic capabilities that we have as humans. With Body, we learned that robots will be all the more present in our lives in the years to come, especially in the entertainment, e-commerce, and service sectors, and that we'll have to rethink our world in order to accommodate the rise of automation. And in this Soul episode, we concluded that robots may never have souls quite like ours, but maybe they can help us achieve a form of digital immortality. And that brings me to the great point of this series. Just like how particles behave differently when observed by humans, AI and robots do not have much purpose without us. Sure, there are dystopian visions of a future such as the world of the Matrix, where robots eventually overpower us. But I don't feel the singularity or a robot uprising. I see robots as assistive, not substitutive. And they really need to remember that they wouldn't be here without us. By the way, with robots helping us with tasks in our lives, the goal is that we have more time to be human. We have more time to create and consume art, spend time with loved ones, go on walks, get outside, do less time doing exhausting work or planning out the minutia of our lives. And after we're gone, they can help to bring comfort to the people around us who we love and who we care about, and carry on our legacy even. But nothing will replace our time here as humans, which is finite, and it is precious. And just like in the movie Soul, it's those small moments of life that really make being human something special. Thank you for listening to Innovation 19. Like many other podcasters, we're using Post by Futuri to create, publish, and optimize this episode. Learn more about why some of the world's top brands rely on Post to power their podcasts at futurimedia.com.